And what do you think about charter limits on restrictions of freedom of speech?
I believe that there are appropriate limits on freedom of speech. I believe that fraud, for example, impersonation, slander of goods, defamation, copyright is a limit of free expression, confidentiality agreements, the Official Secrets Acts. Of course, we believe that there are limits. We don't believe that you can instruct someone and cause them to commit a criminal act or a murder. We don't believe that you can work in conspiracy to commit a crime. That's not what we're talking about here. None of those things happen. We're talking about political debate. Political debate ought not to have any limits. And any limits that are attempted must have to overleap a very stringent test. The test is called the Oakes test. It was devised to protect someone who was charged with trafficking heroin. If heroin dealers can beat the rap by appealing to the Constitution, so too can publishers. I do not believe that there should be any limits whatsoever on political or religious speech that does not fall over into those categories of incitement to riot, for example, conspiracy to commit a murder. So I don't believe those should be acceptable. But it is the bedrock of our Western liberal society that unreasonable speech should be permitted. In fact, unreasonable speech is the only reason we've ever had progress in the West. People who offend the order, whether it's women offending the patriarchy to get the right to vote, the suffragettes, whether it's Martin Luther King offending white society for black equality, whether it's homosexuals who offend norms in order to get equal rights. No liberal progressive cause has ever advanced except for through offending the order. And many of those offenses use quite rude language, or at least language that was regarded as rude in the day. But as long as they did not resort to arms, they were protected by our 800 years of British common law. In fact, it's the other way around. Because they could express themselves through words, they didn't have to express themselves through violence. When Sohrawardi was in Saudi Arabia, he lived in a country racked by violence with terrorists aplenty. Part of the reason that hellholes like that are so violent is because they don't have peaceful ways to vent ideas. They don't have the iterative process of free speech. Even Christendom, 500 and 1,000 years ago, which did not have our full liberties, had violence because when you could not speak out, you had to resort to other means. I put it to you that unbridled political speech is not just allowed, but it is the antidote, the prophylactic against violence. Only a fool would think that by passing a law you could change someone's hearts or mind. Only a fool would go to a Human Rights Commission because he couldn't convince his debate partner or debate opponent. Syed Sohrawardi could not convince me on the radio, so he went to the police to have them convince me. He went to you to have you convince me. Only a fool would do that, because even if this runs its course and Sohrawardi gets his desired punishment, which is for me to say the false words that I apologize, doesn't that fool know that in my heart I don't apologize and I don't mean it? Only a fool would think that censoring and gagging someone is equivalent of changing their mind.
That is, by the way, what he reiterates that he's asking for in this case.
That's what's most offensive. If the man just wants a shakedown of cash, or that's one thing. Nuisance money. I think that was in the Edmonton. Both of them wanted money. I'll have to check. At least one of them did. A shakedown for cash, I can understand that. But for them to want the state to compel me to utter words I don't believe is Orwell at its apex. For me to say words I don't mean. Carla Homolka, Paul Bernardo, the most heinous criminals in this country, convicted of mass murder. The state cannot order them to apologize. It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's odd. And more to the point, people know they wouldn't mean it. What's the use of an apology if they wouldn't mean it? A convicted murderer cannot be ordered to apologize, but a convicted publisher can be ordered by the state to apologize. I'll rot in hell before I use my mouth to say that fascist's words at you with you as his instrument to compel me to do so.
Well, people can ask for things, but they don't necessarily get them.
Well, they got them a month ago in the case of Bazan, who was convicted.
I don't think they've talked about remedy yet.
Human rights commissions in Canada have issued orders for apology to people and to magazines. They've issued, if you can believe it, lifetime bans on people uttering comments. I simply won't comply.